Hi, welcome to the 6th tutorial on Git and GitHub. In our previous tutorials, we have covered all basic terminal and Git commands and have worked only on our respective local repositories. In this tutorial, I'll show you how the version control is managed on a remote repository using GitHub commands. But before we start the commands, let's just have a look at what do I mean by managing the version on remote repository. We have briefly discussed about remote and local repositories in one of the earlier tutorials. However, for the better understanding of the terms, I would like to give you a refresher on the same. A local repository would be the one which resides on your local system, that is the computer on which you're working, and are generally managed using Git commands, whereas the remote repository is something which is not residing in your local system but are hosted on a server accessible to multiple people, most likely over the internet or on a local network. The key difference is that if you are the sole contributor in a project, the chances are that you will never need to set up a remote repository. However, when you are working and sharing the progress of the project along with other people in your team, you will need to manage the version on a remote repository like GitHub. Now the idea behind is that each time you make some changes in your local repository, you have to push the changes to the remote repository so that other people can access those changes by pulling those changes into their local repositories and vice versa. And both pushing as well as pulling are two of the most important commands when it comes to GitHub. Now before we start with our command terminal, let's just create the new remote repository on GitHub and set up the same in our Git command terminal. So we'll just go to GitHub, and if you have not registered on GitHub, I would recommend you to please go ahead on github.com and sign yourself up. Now once you are signed in, all you have to do is create a new repository. Let's name our repository as Git practice, and you have to keep it as public. The description is optional. If you want to put some description to your repository, you can do it here. Let's say and let's create the repository. Now one very important thing to note here is the moment your repository is created, you would get some codes for your command line. These are very important codes when it comes to setting up of GitHub in your Git command line. What you will do is you will copy this line, you will go to your command terminal, and first is you have to be on the path wherein all of your files and branches are. If you see, we have these two files in this folder and we have our branches available as well. So to set up, you will copy and paste the command which was mentioned on your GitHub repository and press enter. If you have not got any error, it means that the command went through successfully. So this is how we set up our GitHub account with our local Git terminal. Another important thing to note here is in your local repository, when you're running the Git commands, the default branch is always called as master. And in case of GitHub, which is your remote repository, your default branch would be origin. Now that we are done with the intro and setup, let's move on to the first part of our GitHub commands, which is basically be covering only the Git push command. Now Git push is like your Git commit in your local repository. So what we can simply do is, in order to push the existing branch which we have in our local repository, again you can copy and paste. As of now what I'm doing is I'm removing this -u and simply running this command git push origin master, which means that I'm pushing my local master branch to origin remote repository. So the moment you run enter, it will get pushed to your remote repository. Now just to confirm, you can switch back to your GitHub account and just refresh, and you will see that both the files, which is text.txt and the new feature.txt, along with your commit messages, are now featuring in your GitHub repository, which is your remote repository. Now there are three types of push which I want to cover. The first git push was the basic push which we have just done, wherein we mentioned git push followed by the origin and master, wherein we are stating that we want to push the master branch into the origin branch. Now if you go back to your GitHub profile, you would see there's just master branch which is currently visible on your GitHub account. Now in order to push all of your branches, since we have 2 branches created in our local repository, and if you push all of the branches, you can run this command git push all and just mention origin. We will not mention master this time because we are pushing all of our local branches, and press enter. You will again get a confirmation that we are done with pushing the quotes branch as well. Now if we go back to our GitHub account, we'll see, let me refresh it. We will see that our quotes branch is also there. And if we select the quotes branch, we have the same 2 files on our remote repository now. The third type of push is git push -u followed by origin master. So this command basically takes a note of the branches in which you are currently working on your local repository and the remote repository branch in which you want to push your changes. So what happens is, once you execute this command, the next time you want to make any changes or you want to push any changes to your remote repository, you do not have to write origin and master again and again. All you can do is simply write git push and press enter, and it will take care of the branches on its own. So let me execute this. So you can see that the confirmation is branch master set up to track remote branch master from origin. So let's make some changes in our master branch. Let's delete this, save it. Now we have committed the changes in our local repository. But if you go back to your GitHub and check your master branch, in your text file, you will see that you will still have those 4 quotes. Since we have not pushed the changes to our remote repository, it will still show 4 quotes. Now we will push the changes, and this time we'll only mention git push, and we'll get the confirmation that the changes are done. If we go back and probably refresh it, there you go. Now we have those 3 quotes which are there in our local repository. I hope you got the idea behind how the remote repository functions. It is very similar to how your local repository functions. It's just that your commands are a little bit different, but conceptually it's exactly the same. Now in our next tutorial, we will touch on the concept of pulling, cloning, and forking our repository. Thank you.